Well, hello all. I have a lovely sandbank here and I'm planning to use this evil looking spade to dig a cave or a den or a bug out place here in the sandbank. It's fairly isolated. Just have a look around. We're now looking west. There is just something sticking out there, a little chimney or something. Now we're looking south, east, and north, where our sandbank is. We're going to dig it something like this. Just depends how much the soil holds together. Well, I haven't been going for long, but one thing I've discovered is the sand is more collapsy than I thought. I think I can only go a certain way in, but I'm going to try and get it deep enough that I can sleep in here. I already have most of the length burrowed out with my feet there, my head here. I just need to get about another half a meter, 2 feet out of sand under there. We can sleep, just look above, clear sky, all the way above, so I'll be able to see the stars clearly. Plenty of open sky, so this is going to be a beautiful sky platform from the head of my bed. I do expect my feet to get a little covered with sand. Here is our little hidey hole from a little bit further away. You can see all the sand that I pushed down the bank, and that should be long enough to sleep in. Well, here we are in our lovely stealth camping space. This is the hole in a burrow. It's going to be a bit sandy. There I've put up my camouflage netting. I can see through it a little bit. Look, you can see through the camouflage netting. So it's quite nice. You can see somewhat through it, but no one can see through to us. It's like a one-way mirror. So I feel quite secure here. There's absolutely not a single house in sight. I've got my little stove, and it's fairly safe here from the wind and everything. I'm going to make a nice little flat spot in there. I have my pixie pot that fits on here. We have some meatballs finally. So let's stoke up our pixie pot. and get our meatballs going. I think it's going to pay to do it as slow as possible. We'll just keep stirring so it doesn't burn. Lovely. There's hardly any wind here, so I can put it on super low. We've got meatballs and spaghetti, which I carried around from my last stealth camp and never got to eat. Must say I feel pretty secure here. Yeah, it's about an hour to sunset, or perhaps 3/4 of an hour to sunset. Let's have a drink of something. I've got a glass somewhere. I know I did bring a glass, but I can't find it for the moment. Well, that's great. We'll just have to use let's put it this way, we don't bang it. We'll just have to use the cup from our thermos flask. Well, let's get some wine going, some red wine. It's quite delicious. Yeah, this is in the lee of the wind, so it's also very protected. There's not a house that can see me. You know, I feel totally, virtually secure here. And with the camouflage netting that you saw, it's going to be even more secure. So there we are for the night. We set up, we've got supper on the go, we've got our drinks going. I've got some cheese and tomato sauce, which I'm going to add to this when it's warmer. We'll keep stirring so it doesn't catch on the bottom. You know, I always feel very safe stealth camping, and stealth camping on a bank I think is even more safe. Now, this bank has got a lot of bushes and things, so I guess snakes could still crawl perhaps through the bushes. But, you know, they're unlikely to do so on a bank, so I feel safer on a bank than on the flat. We have some cobras and we have some puff adders, and someone just the other day, their dog got bitten by a puff adder, which is, I guess, similar to a rattler, except much more lazy, but very venomous bite that would have killed the dog, but luckily the vet had anti-venom. As I say, I don't really ever, although I have spent a lot of time in these areas, I virtually have never seen snakes. I've never seen a poisonous snake. And you know, I always feel one needs to engage with God. You know, involve him. engage him, speak to him. I was reading about the mark of Cain. Now, this is what happened to Cain. Cain was the son of Adam and Eve. He brought an offering with Abel. Cain's offering was rejected, so Abel's offering was accepted and Cain's was rejected by God. So Abel got jealous, and then in the process of time, he slew his brother Abel. And God had warned him about this jealousy thing. And so God was going to banish him from, they were already banished from Eden, but he was going to banish him from his sight further away into the wilderness. And Cain engaged with God. He said, my punishment's too great for me. There's wild things out there. There are things that can attack and kill me. Look, there were no people at that time. He was worried about the wild animals. There were no people out there because Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel were the first people around. So because Cain engaged with God, God did Cain a huge favor. He put a mark upon Cain that made anything that encountered Cain scared to kill him, afraid of the punishment, the consequences. And what would that have been? That would have only been wild animals. And it wasn't like he put a physical mark on Cain. He just made what we see today, that wild animals are afraid of man. Like, it's amazing how most animals have a natural fear of man. And that is like the mark of Cain. So I actually want this mark of Cain on me so that I am feared by any wild animals that happen to be around, and so they just leave me alone. They feel scared to tamper with me. And I feel that there must have been so much rubbish written about this mark of Cain that it was somehow portrayed as a negative thing. It was actually a favor that God was doing to Cain. And why was God doing this favor for Cain? The favor was that God was sending him out into this wild, he was like going to have to stealth camp in the wild, among all the wild animals. And he was scared. And he had a right to be scared. So God said, I'll make other things scared of you. I'll put a mark upon you. It's an invisible mark that all the wild animals, we see that even today, are scared of mankind. So it was a favor that he did him. And you almost see that it's a favor because 1 or 2 generations later, a guy called Lamech gets into a fight with some other chap, and he gets wounded, but the other chap gets killed. And he said, 70 times more of the mark of Cain should be upon me if somebody wants to kill me. So he's also asking for this protection. He's asking for it in spades, that nobody should attack him, and everyone should be afraid of him because he did it out of self-defense, it seems. He didn't kill the man out of intentionality. It was out of self-defense. He was hurt in the process. And so he didn't seem to mind the mark of Cain. He looked at it as a positive thing, and he wanted it in spades. Look it up in Genesis 5. So there is this natural fear of humans that animals have, and I think that was the mark of Cain. It was a blessing. Now I'm saying engage with God. Look, when Adam and Eve were sinned, ate of the fruit, and God called them up to give an account, and God says, okay, well, I'm going to banish you from Eden. They don't show any love for God. They don't engage with God. They don't say, oh God, please don't banish us from your presence. Unlike Cain, who said, please God, I can't, it's too dangerous for me to be out here. And so the result is Adam and Eve, you see, they're not engaging. When Cain and Abel brought an offering, you don't see Adam and Eve bringing an offering to God. But Cain and Abel are bringing an offering. So there's still contact with God. They're engaging with God. And God is showing ways to engage positively with him. what type of offering he should bring. So let's put in, I've got some cheese and tomato sauce. Let's put that in. Yum, yum. So, spaghetti, meatballs, cheese, and tomato paste. How delightful. So, whereas Adam and Eve just gave up and accepted that they would be out of God's presence, although they weren't actually, there was still access to God, obviously, because Cain and Abel seemed to find access to God. But you can see Adam and Eve didn't even seem to want to bring an offering and to engage with God. At least their sons were engaging. And whenever you engage with God, you ask him a favor, like Abel did. He made Cain's punishment more bearable. I'm thinking of David, how often he engaged with God. He engaged, and although David found he would have liked God to be a little faster in responding, we see that in David's life, God always came through in time. But if you read the Psalms, how often David says, oh, how long? How long, how long? Job engaged with God. How long must I suffer, God? How long, how long? And there's this wonderful parable in Luke 18 about what they call the importunate widow. I think that's an unfortunate name. You could call it the engaging widow. The widow who engaged with Christ, with the judge, the unjust judge. And the unjust judge got tired of her engagements all the time and gave her her request. And Christ used this as an example that we should never grow tired of engaging with God to help us, to pray always, even though it seems to be taking some time. So I think the moral of that parable is not that she's importuning or begging urgently. The moral of the story is everyone who engages with God gets blessed. I think it's the Syrophoenician woman, a woman whose daughter who had an evil spirit. She engaged with Christ. Christ at first ignored her, then called her, said it's not good to give food to the dogs, implying that she was a dog. And God was just testing her urgency to engage with him and her persistence. And she persisted, and her daughter was healed. So we see one of the reasons why God appears slow to engage is to see just how persistent we are, how convinced we are that God will help us. And the degree to which we're convinced that he will help us shows our faith. And that is why that parable in Luke 18 ends by saying, and when the Son of Man returns, will he find faith on the earth? Will he find people engaging with him, expecting a good result? Or will they just give up? Or will they just not even engage and just think, oh, it's pointless to engage with God? Faith is shown by engagement with God. So enjoyed these meatballs. Especially with the added cheese and tomato sauce. It was so delicious. And I was lucky at my gas cooker actually had run out of gas just as it got hot. So we see the woman who tried to touch Christ's tassels, and she was healed. She engaged with him. Well, she wanted to just touch the tassels. She didn't want to draw attention to her plight. But Christ made sure that the engagement was noted for all posterity in the Bible. If she just touched and been healed, no one would have known about it. And no one would have known that engaging with Christ always brings a good result. Well, that was delicious. I do like the spaghettis and meatball. So, yum, yum, yum. This red wine is also super. I think we're going to have a lovely night here. Whoops. I was up at 4 in the morning this morning. And wow, what a beautiful new moon. It had risen at 4. I looked at it at 4:30. It was just above the horizon. Talk and drink. But it looked so eerie, a new moon with just that little crescent at the bottom. And I think we're about 2 or 3 days from the new moon. So it's going to be a really super dark night tonight. Which suits me because then I'll see satellites. What is so wonderful here, just let me show you how clear the sky is above me. Just look at that. The sky is clear, and I've got this huge space. And I'm looking in the right direction. There's going to be the Milky Way, I think. Because previously when I looked this is looking towards the south. I'm going to see all the Milky Way, and it's going to be absolutely gorgeous tonight. Now I will say this, that I did find this bank soil. It's almost like sea sand, and it tends to collapse. But it'll do for one night. So I'm sure we'll sleep okay, yeah? I didn't bring a ground sheet or a pump up bed because the sand is soft and the sleeping bag is warm, and I think I'm going to be fairly comfortable just sleeping in here. I couldn't fit a pump up bed in here. I didn't dig a big enough hole for that. So it's just the roots that are seemingly holding the sand from caving in. And, obviously my head's going to be out, so if it caves in, it just caves in on my feet. It's not a problem. Well, we're just going to wait for it to get dark, and then the last time I saw 14 satellites and 1 shooting star. I think I've got a far better piece of sky tonight. I'm hoping to see far more satellites. Shooting stars are just random, I suppose. There must be times when they're plentiful and times when they're few. Yeah, but I think my record was like 25 satellites that I've seen in one evening. And last time I stealth camped, I saw two satellites traveling together in the same direction, almost like they were linked. I've never seen that before. So that was interesting. You always see something interesting. And no rain predicted for tonight. So I think it's going to be absolutely gorgeous stealth camping here in a burrow in a bank tonight. Well, there is me with my feet and bag in the burrow. Here is my pillow. Feels pretty comfortable, quite nice. There's back to the burrow. There's my camouflage top. Here's my sleeping bag and pillow. No ground sheet. Just a little thin ground sheet because it's fairly soft. Yeah, it's delightful so far.